a couple of reasons. I guess one of them is that whole idea of identity foreclosure, where, you're solely defined by what you do. And I think I was consumed by it for a while there, consumed by the game or the sport or whatever you want to call it, where it was who I was. And, if you go down that path, which some people do, then you don't ski anymore when you're an old man, and who are you? You're lost because you're not a skier anymore, and that's who you are. So it's not the case anymore. I'm. It is a huge part of what I do, but it's not who I am. I have all these other facets to me, but skiing is what I do.
Hello everyone, and welcome back or welcome to the Waterski Podcast. This is Matteo your host, and the goal of this podcast hasn't changed in this 2021. It's the same as it was in 2019, in 2020. We're trying to promote the sport of water skiing, trying to grow it through more exposure and more participation. That's really what the Waterski Podcast is all about. I'm really excited to start this new year of episodes with this one, episode 59, which is with Nick Adams. Now, this is a profoundly rich conversation. We cover his journey, we cover just your general water ski talk, but also we go deep into certain aspects that maybe I haven't really touched on with other guests. Some challenges that are quite psychological in nature, and how Nick has managed to address them and overcome them through experience and training. But it does also follow the usual format. So we talk about Nick's journey, the decision of being, proficient at an event, slalom, that wasn't, at least at the time, what Australia was famous for. Australia being, a pool of 3 eventers like probably no other country in the world. The tradition there is very strong, and yet Nick decided to pursue slalom with all the challenges that come with it, right? So it is at the same time a usual format, but a very rich and different conversation. We even got to touch about some of the things Nick has overcome to be a more complete skier and enjoy the process more as he pursues excellence in the 6 buoys. So I really hope you will enjoy this conversation. I certainly enjoyed interviewing Nick, and I even got to know parts of his story that I wasn't really aware of at all. So sit back and enjoy this. I have an announcement before we get into the interview. I will be coaching at the Waterski Academy in Portugal, February 13th to the 22nd. I think it will be a good chance of getting some early season skiing for anyone who's interested to join. So if you are considering a little bit of week, that's the week of Carnival. So some of you may have vacation from work or school. If you're interested in joining in, should be a good fun week of skiing. You can just shoot me an email, matteo@thewaterskipodcast.com, and I'll send you all the details. So yeah, I hope you'll be able to join us. That said, let's jump into this interview with Nick Adams. And see you next week. Nick, welcome to the podcast, man. I'm so glad to have you here. And before we start, I must say, you're one of those guests that a lot of people ask me to have on. And generally, when people ask me to have guests on, I'm resistant. Who are you to tell me who to interview? But luckily, these two merged. I wanted to interview and people wanted to hear from you. So I'm super glad to have you here.
Yeah, Matteo, I'm glad to be here, mate. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad that we're able to try to finally hook it up. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and hopefully the challenges of being from literally the opposite sides of the world will allow us to record
Yes,
this. Man, a
exactly.
long time. Last time I saw you was in Cali when we were at Marcus's, no?
I was gonna say, I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, when was the last time I saw that beard in real life? And I think it must have been at MB's or one of the dealer things that we're all catching up at in Cali.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been a long time, man. It's a lot's happened since then.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the world, as we all know.
Yeah.
But what has happened with you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, well, yeah, like you said, COVID. It's been a wild year. Obviously, for me, my annual sort of life, this endless summer thing that I do has been affected greatly. Once I knew that it was looking very much like, hey, you're not going to be able to get to the States this year, things changed. My plan of going over and training and being based out of Florida to continue my training and stuff with HO and everything else was pretty much put on hold or put to the side. So my plans changed pretty much to stay domestic. I stayed in Australia through, I'm sort of from further down south in Australia, so it's opposite to the States, obviously, and where you guys are. So the further south you are, it's not like the warmer. It's getting a lot colder.
Right.
So as it went, the seasons went on, and the end of the ski season sort of happened here. And nationals was cancelled. I mean, thinking about it, we got really lucky with Moomba happening when it did. I think honestly, if Moomba was a couple of days later, we may have lost that event too. But once the season ended and it looked like I wasn't going to be able to get over and get training in the States, I sort of made plans to head further north. So I was further up in Australia, and it was funny how it worked out. I sort of had the plan to go up to the very top of Australia and train in the city of Darwin. I have sort of a nice setup there and some close family friends that I train with, and the plan was just to go up there and train. But then there's a lot of skiers that ski with me around the country and this part of the world who they were sort of in contact, and then they sort of heard, they were like, wait, so you're not going to be in the States this year, so where are you going to be? Sort of like, we're thinking about skiing through the winter,
Right.
So it ended up actually being a pretty busy year with a lot of people coming to ski and training up north. And of course, up top is tropical. So it was a winter, and actually my first technical winter since 2005,
Since
but when we say winter,
2005. What?
yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, it's when I say endless summer, I'm not playing around. It's been a long time, so yeah, it was strange. But like I said, tropical up there. So when I say winter, it wasn't really winter. I skied in shorts the whole time.
Oh, skiing in shorts the whole time. I was expecting at least
Yeah.
some kind of like
No.
shorty or something. Nothing.
Yeah, nah, man. I mean, I use my syndicate top sometimes, but that was sort of down here before I left to head north. But up there, nah, I'm shorts all day. Life's better in board shorts, Miss Anne.
Man, that's what a change. Like in a way, jokingly, I want to say, "Oh, I'm sorry for you," but
Yeah.
no, I mean, I can.
But
I can see. No, obviously, I can see the difference. I mean, you spent 15 years, going back and forth from one place to the next, and as you know, I
Yeah.
can relate to that. So
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you are one of the few that can relate to, you go to the different, I guess, lifestyles, and I know skiing is involved in both, but still, I was thinking about it too with you. I mean, still very different lifestyles and lives you would have lived when you were at home versus when you were in the States. But yeah, so, no, it's funny when people ask me how you doing, and you say good, it's sort of like, I don't know, it comes with this sense of I'm good, but it's not guilty, but a bit like, that sense of empathy, like I'm good, but I know it's been a tough year for a lot of people, and I'm super lucky that even though it was wildly different compared to a normal year for me, it was still an awesome year. It was just very different.
yeah. And speaking of different, I think there's a sense in which your story, which I'll be honest with you, I don't know very well at all. is going to be a little bit different from the guests that I've had from this upper part of the globe. So,
Sure.
how'd you get in it? How water skiing? How did you start?
How did I get in the game? Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to a few people that you would have interviewed in terms of other pro skiers or whatever. Just the fact that I had family in it. I think the story just sort of goes that my dad was getting into it right around at the time that I was about to be born, and I think the wording was, we'll buy a boat when the baby's born. And I think it was like the week after I was born, he bought a boat.
Nice.
So he was getting into it as a hobby at the time. And we had family friends that were skiers, and it sort of went from there, So I sort of learned to ski as a tiny kid, 3, 4 sort of thing. And then, like, I know there's going to be, some other skiers in Australia that would pipe up, listen to this, going, I remember seeing you ski when I was a little kid, and you weren't really that into it on the duck or whatever. But I probably didn't ski tournaments until I was probably 10, 11. But, there was some years in there where where stuff happened. When I was like 5 and 6, 12 months apart, I actually broke both of my femurs. So it's funny how it works out. Yeah, so... it was, once I was in and I was away, and skiing tournaments and everything, it sort of consumed everything that I did. But, for a while there when I was little, it took me a while to get going. It's actually, it's pretty wild.
How did you break both of your femurs? Was that skiing?
No, not skiing.
Okay.
As soon as I mentioned it, then I was like, oh no, he's going to ask how. Basically, we lived across the road from a school, and the first one, they actually happened like 100 meters apart from each other, but nearly 12 months apart.
Okay, nearly 12 months apart. Because I was going to say...
Yeah, nearly 12 months apart, not the same time.
If you manage to break both femurs at the same time, age 5, where you're sort of like soft and rubbery, I mean, what happened to you,
Exactly. No,
but it wasn't through skiing, like just accidents.
It's pretty bad. The first time, the actual, you're not going to believe this. So the first time, I actually broke the first one flying a kite. So like, there's like these huge logs that separate like the grass from like the shredded bark or mulch or whatever. And I fell like just before the log, landed on the log, snap. And then the second time, there's going to be some UK skiers, I'm sure, that'll be happy to hear about this. But the second time I was actually diving to play like a game of cricket, and I dove, and it was like concrete, and then it was like a gutter, and then it was like a sharp edge on the gutter, and then just dirt, and I dove to catch the ball, landed on the gutter, snap. So... yeah, it was not much fun for a while there, man. I mean, they were separate, but, both times it's a full cast down the broken leg and half cast down the non-broken leg, and you're in it for a long time. So it was a pretty bad ordeal for a little kid. And the funny thing is, too, my mum saw one of the doctors not too long ago, and at the time, like, honestly, after the second one, I think my parents probably got interviewed, like, what's going on here? But no, at the time, after the second one, this particular doctor was sort of like, look, don't be surprised if he's nothing to do with sports when he's older. Like, he won't be playing any sports as an adult or anything like that. And it was funny. She ran into him like not that long ago, and he was like, what's Nick doing anyway? What's he doing with his life? And she's like, well, actually,
he's into sports.
Yeah, he does a little sports.
All right, so.
Why do I feel like your brain is catching up on, like, geez, I didn't know this about this dude.
No, I had no idea, obviously no idea. But I like how your mom went to the doctor with proof that, you got into the sports big time. So,
I wish I was there to see that.
Well, so what happened? You break your femurs, fast forward 5 years, you're skiing, you're on the dock, but not really into it? Like, what was it? Like, not...
Oh, I think there's a couple of skiers that did quite well domestically who were around when I was starting to get into it, and they would just give me a hard time, more particularly on not getting into enter, trick, and jump. I think it's one of those things that I think was probably coming, and I think you're curious. We discussed it off the air just about this, but just like the difference in the cultures too. Skiing in Australia is, it has always been pretty prestigious in terms of 3-event skiing. Australia is pretty well known internationally for producing a brilliant 3-event skiers. True. So, being a single eventer at the age that I did get into it and everything else was sort of unusual. It obviously is the way it worked out, and I don't need to tell you how it sort of is on an international basis in terms of how single eventers go with the small margin of 3 eventers that actually make it. But it's it's just a little different in that sense. Not as much anymore, but it definitely was then.
All right, so you started as a single eventer, because I mean, in my mind, Australia, great country for 3-event skiers and for jumping. So you must have been a little bit of a fish out of water, wanting to be a slalom skier.
Sorry, say that again. You totally cut out on the last bit.
So I said, like, you were, like when I think of Australia, I think of, great jump skiers and 3-eventers. So as a young wannabe slalom skier, you must have been a little bit of a fish out of water.
Yeah, definitely. I was, but I wasn't. I mean, in national tournaments and stuff, I definitely was. 3-eventing is so strong as a junior for me. Being a single eventer for 99% of my junior skiing, it was strange because, of course, everyone that I was competing against at the for podium spots or whatever at nationals and everything else were all 3-eventers. So yeah, I was in that sense, but I was my dad's crew and all the guys that I would ski with, all a lot older than me, except for one buddy of mine. We were all slalom skiers. It was sort of the way it went anyway. I did the other two when I was sort of just coming out of, under 10s and under 14s, but barely because, I didn't have access to a jump. They all slalomed and the trick obviously took a lot of time that my dad didn't have. We were just slaloming.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can see that. And I think that's the story of a lot of skiers who, end up being just one-eventers, and generally that's slalom, like the environment surrounding you,
For sure.
What were those early junior years for you? Were you doing a lot of tournaments in Australia? Were you starting to go international? How were those teenager years?
Yeah, it sort of changed a little bit. I don't know when it would have been. It would have been, early high school sort of times. That I was sort of asked, and it had been discussed that I was going to go over to get coaching as a junior from Chet Rayleigh in Florida, and it just it stemmed from there. I ended up going over. We had close family friends that were Americans, but they were living in Melbourne for the dad's work at the time, and they were over here for a year. But then once I started getting sent to the States to get training, originally from Chet, but then just in the States. It was sort of natural that I would stay with them, and by then they had moved back to Florida, and so I sort of had this second home base over there, and I had what was in a lot of ways to me considered family that I would live with, and when I would train over there, and they were skiers. So yeah,
that helps. They understand.
Exactly.
They understand that you're going off the house, and back in.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and it's just the way it worked out from there. And I think, my parents, my dad, both, they wanted both, I think, my brother and I to be good skiers, but they never really expected it to take off, my skiing to take off like it did when it did, Right. And it was probably right, around that time. And yeah, it's just the way it's worked out, man. I am very, very fortunate the way it worked out, and the people that I have behind me to allow me to keep doing what I do, and I love what I get to do.
Yeah, no, it's a nice lifestyle. I'm not gonna lie, and you
it is, right?
And you do get. I mean, at least personally, this year I got to think about it more and more. I mean, fortunate. Fortunate is the word that comes to mind. You know, like we get to
For sure.
to be outside next to water, considering the 2020 terminology, safe. You know, like distant and all
For
of
sure.
that.
Yeah.
And there's other people that do a sport like, you know, lifestyle that this year couldn't really do it for whatever
Yeah.
reason. So no, we are fortunate, and I think for you it goes a little deeper. At least I feel akin to you in a way that we weren't particularly pushed as younglings. You know, we weren't. You know,
No.
which we see so much nowadays, and
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure, man. It goes without saying. I'm self-driven here. It is not pushed in. I am not fifth generation skier. It is what I want to be doing. You know, it's funny. I actually had this question asked to me the other day. We were talking about skiing, and you know, they're a skier. They were skiing with me a little. I probably see them once a year to ski. And, you know, just going on about it not being a huge sport and the financial side could be tough, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, like, you know, but if I could give you $1 million to not ski and not help people where they're skiing, I told him, I'll tell you the same thing I said to him, I would not take it. This is where I want to be, man. This is what I love to do.
yeah, yeah. No, I would have answered the same exact question. I mean, the same exact answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The same answer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
and it's funny. Yeah, this year it's weird because, you know, a lot of my training is set up with, I'm a firm believer in terms of peaks and flows with your actual skiing and how I peak for events and everything else, and, you know, train like that it was all sort of out of whack, that I didn't have my tournament season internationally. So I sort of went into this, you know, I guess training, I don't know, exile in a lot of ways.
Right.
Where I was sort of up north is a bit of the Wild West in a lot of ways. I was sort of in the real outback where this place is where I trained up there. And it's beautiful, but it was, like I said, very exile compared to the busy travel schedule that I would normally have in a northern hemisphere summer. So it was funny. You get to reflect on a lot of that side of it, and I guess how lucky we are to do what we do, and just, you know, make, I guess, plans or what I am planning to do in the future, and how I want to approach when things get somewhat back to normal, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, and just a quick parenthesis. How have things been there in Australia? Because I'll tell you the truth. Like, from this side of the world, they're portraying Australia and obviously New Zealand as COVID is gone. Like, they're fine down there.
Yeah, it's funny. New Zealand, I think, has been sort of hailed the COVID killers. They had a little bit of pushback for a second there, but they're back on top of it. Australia has been very good. It's a shame that, like, I was super fortunate that I left to go further up north to Queensland and to, like I said, Darwin for a lot of the winter. My timing was pure fluke, but impeccable in time, you know, in terms of when I left to go up there.
Yeah.
Because down south, and especially Melbourne, the city where I'm from, and obviously where Moomba is, it was hit pretty hard. They had a lot of COVID cases, a big spike there, to the point where that state was pretty much whole shut down. And even to the point, like, even today, I think a lot of the rest of the country is still a bit hesitant to go to that state, even though it's been, you know, clear for 40 days or whatever of any new cases, you know, community transmissions. But just in this last week, like right before Christmas, we've just had this outbreak in Sydney, to the point where the borders are tightening up state to state for Sydney. And if you're in, like, the greater Sydney area, they're sort of like saying goodbye to Christmas, you're going to be in quarantine sort of stuff. So it's really sucky, just because of the timing of it and things seeming to get back on track, and now Sydney's getting locked down. So it is what it is, man. It's you know, it's nothing size-wise compared to a lot of other countries, and I'm sure we're going to get back on top of it, but it was just, yeah, brutal timing for Sydney to get it how it has.
Yeah, and it's always tough when you get it in a big metropolis, right? Because then
For sure.
the chances of it spreading out they're very high. So
For sure, and it's just especially the holidays too, with everyone traveling for. It's a mad scramble right now to try and get on top of it. And I think Australians are pretty, like, I was talking to some people when I was traveling the other day for a clinic, I think everyone is pretty good at everyone is behind the idea of us wanting to get on top of this, even if it's taking some time out of whatever you had planned, just because it's much bigger than that. So yeah, I'm sure we're gonna get on top of it.
Yeah, no, it looks from here, again, from this side of the world, it looks like you guys are definitely more on top of it, and the willingness to be on top of it seems to be higher. So hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously from here, Italy got hit pretty hard pretty early, but now you're saying it's sort of been okay for a little, but not as good as it was, or what?
Well, we got into a fairly big second wave like anywhere else in Europe, but we are slowly but surely, like, the trend is going down in cases, and deaths are always too many, but they are going down also. So hopefully the timing of it going down and then the vaccine coming, hopefully that would avoid a third wave. That's the conversation. And then Christmas here is way limited, but I don't care too much about Christmas. I'm just gonna try to make it to my folks before they close us in. So in a couple of days.
Yeah, got it. Yep. Same.
Back to you, and So juniors, you start to travel a bit internationally. Like, let me ask you this, because you're not the first guest that I have that has skied with Chet in those, formative years, let's say, where you're trying to shape up the kind of skier you are from a technical standpoint. I'd be curious to hear your experience with Chet. Like, what did you leave Chet with? Like, what did he give you?
Good question. I mean, Chet was pretty influential on a lot of skiers. He's done a lot for me. I guess as much as anything, Chet sort of taught me to think for myself out there. And when I say out there, I mean when you're out there and you're in the trenches and it's really windy and you've got this tailwind and you want to get a certain pass done as a junior to make junior masters or something. One of the biggest things I think for me is that, Chet sort of helped me form my own identity as to who I was as a skier. I don't think he's solely to claim as to my actual technique. I think there's a few in there, but he definitely has a handprint on it. But like I said, a lot of his stuff with me, because I was pretty, I was still pretty little then in terms of me as a skier. It was more just, like I said, forming my identity out there as to how I would respond in certain situations and to think on my feet with things that happen to you out in the course.
Yeah, which is huge, like, I think.
Yeah, it is, no doubt, and the other thing is to think for myself. I know that there's a lot of, like I would say to any of my own students now, there's a lot of people that will love to tell you stuff, and the better you start skiing, of course, as I found out, they want to give you advice. Just because some people, and I know people listening, have that one guy in the boat that they just can't help but give their point of view.
Right.
But then there's, the others that just, they want to have a piece of, if you're starting to ski well, say that they told you something. But, I when I say Chet taught me to think for myself, it means, teach me that I was a good enough skier to know when to listen and when to not to, including him,
Yeah, it's that to me is a trait of a good coach. Like, whenever someone promotes like autonomy and independence in their athletes, then it means to me that they're onto something and they're good coaches.
Exactly. I don't. Yeah, and it's the same with any student of mine. I don't want them to, think that it's this. Because it honestly kills me, Matteo. I hear of it all the time, and you know damn well that being a good skier does not necessarily equate to you being a good coach.
Yep.
And so it kills me sometimes. That was a very, very agreeable. Yep. So it sort of no comment. There's a lot of skiers where it kills me that they've heard something they like, and this is a good skier that's being paid to go somewhere to coach, that they they're just pegging every different shape into the same round hole, and it just about kills me when I hear of these people doing it. But I mean, I guess it helps me when I get a chance to work with these skiers. But and a lot of the time, the high end skiers that I ski regularly, I want them to question me. I want this to be something where it's a back and forth, because I'm gonna learn from them as well, but they're gonna get better again, learning to know when it is to listen and what to take in and how they improve.
Yeah, I think it's a super hard skill to master, right? Like being able to listen to and then pick what you like. It's a bit of an interesting balance, because in order to be able to pick what you need from the myriad of things that someone might want to tell you in the boat, it takes the ability to discern what's good information and what's bad. But also, in order to do that, you have to have some kind of understanding of how slalom works, like whatever understanding you ended up shaping for yourself allows you to say, okay, no, that I'm not going to do at all, whereas that's interesting, I could try that. Maybe not this set, maybe after this streak of tournaments I have, but I might try it, So
for sure, yeah, and those concepts are huge. You don't get better until you do have those sets where you are, I guess, calibrating something new to potentially something that might surprise you. That that actually did do that, or that actually it didn't necessarily do what he told me, but it helped me get this or whatever.
Exactly, and because you are, as you said, like Chet wasn't the only person who shaped, let's say, from a technical standpoint, the skier that you are. Who were your other influences growing up? Like who helped you shape beyond you, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, Chet is one of them. My dad, John, definitely is. I have to give props to Chris Rossi. Roscoe definitely gave me a chance as a little chubby Australian to train, and like you said, technique wise, definitely onto me about certain things. Yep. And same with Will, just purely because I think Will and I are quite different skiers, but I've learned a lot from him in terms of being able to bounce stuff off. So Will Asher is definitely there too. And there's a couple of others. Ed Hickey is another huge one. There's a few other names in Florida that have just helped me. Like I said, more as much as anything, helped me shape not just my technique, but who I am as a skier. It was funny when you were bringing up the chest stuff before too. I think one of the other things that him and Rossi and Sully as well sort of helped me with was that little bit of imposter syndrome, where everyone has it in their own sort of way, but being an international and going over to the States or wherever as a junior, just the fact that you're getting to do what you love and being away internationally and getting to train and do all, have these endorsements and stuff come towards you, there is definitely that part of you that is almost like you're not necessarily owning that you belong there. And they help me grow into that, not just to give me confidence on the water, but just that I belong there. And that was huge for me. Because you go back home and you see guys or friends or people that are from the area that you're from that never make it out. They're not going to make it out at all. And they live in these bubbles or whatever, or never really get to do the stuff that they love. So I guess it helped me get over that imposter syndrome stuff, like I said, but as well, really not take anything for granted. I really want to make the most of everything that I do with my skiing and everything around it.
Yeah, no, it's an important thing to get over. I think it's hard, but it allows you to, if anything, be even more certain about the life choices you make, because obviously deciding to go abroad and pursue, skiing, and whether it's just a lifestyle or also performances, and generally it's both.
Yeah,
it's not an easy choice.
For sure, and it comes back to this thing of, it's how bad do you want it?
Yep.
I mean, people talk about it with sacrifice, and that I don't know, even the 10,000 hour rule. Man, I mean, Matteo, I've done 10,000 hours on planes alone, let alone the skiing.
Right.
And like I said, it's just one of these things. It just gets to the point where you get to a point in anything that you love to do, and you get to do as much as we get to do with skiing, is that it comes down to this game of centimeters. How many pro skiers would kill for a quarter bowl, half a bowl PB? It's just, yeah, how bad do you want it?
Plenty of
Yeah,
them.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it just gets down to that point. Nothing's owed to me. I'm not fifth generation skier here, like we said before. In a lot of ways, to begin with, it was like, you're not even supposed to be here. You're from the suburbs where skiers don't come out of there. You know what I mean? I'm not from Florida or anywhere else. It's just, I just really want to do this. I loved getting to do this, man.
When was it that, because it sounded to me like, maybe after, 10, 11 years old, like the willingness to become a better skier was there. But when was it that it clicked in, sort of like, okay, I'm ready to do, whatever I can do to run this pass or to make it to this tournament? When was there a moment where it became evident?
That a moment in time in which it was evident that I wanted to go after it, or that I could?
That you wanted.
It was very early on, man. I mean, I just, I had this thing above my wall when I was, it was actually directly above my bed in high school, and it said, passion before being comfortable. And it was something that I definitely was going in terms of having to go places, to get where I wanted to get to with my skiing. And it's still the case to this day. I mean, it's a little bit of a different, I guess, way I go about it now. We can get into that, but yeah, it was very early on, because I wasn't going to where I was from and the direction in most people's lives go where I'm from. If you're not about the hustle to get to where you want to go to with something, you just won't,
Yeah. No, I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, since I love the first, I think there's always something interesting to learn from first moments. When was the first time you represented Australia at an international event?
Ooh, at an international event. There's definitely someone listening to this going, I know exactly when it was, and you better not get this wrong, dude.
Okay.
But no, like the stats guys, there's definitely a few of them out there. I'm going to get in trouble. It's fine. Does Moomba count?
I don't know. Does it? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've done 4 worlds. My first worlds was Chile, and I've done Mexico, Paris, and obviously the last worlds. So yeah, I guess you count those. I've done plenty of like our Asian Australasian, like our version of Pan Am's, which is the Oceanias, a few times now. But yeah, I mean, Moomba is really, in a lot of ways, the first taste in international proceedings for me, just because I would ski it as a junior and would get the last few years in juniors, get a wild card into the seniors as well. So that was definitely my first taste. So that was, going into under 17s from under 14s through under 17s.
See, that's funny, because like I would have said it doesn't count, because what I wanted to get to is representing your country.
I've just totally thrown this off.
But,
that's a totally different thing, right?
But I have the sense, and I've only been to Moomba once, but I have the sense that Moomba for Australian skiers means something completely different than for foreigners. And a
little, but as well, being it is hometown for me too. There was a while there where I wasn't stringing one together, just because I think it was a little bit of the hometown stuff, and I had a lot of people at that event that wanted me to do well, and I was probably at the top of that list. But no, don't get me wrong. Representing your country is a whole different thing. It is, by far up there at the top of what I love to get to do with Australia. With skiing. It's just one of these things. Representing Australia is like nothing else. And we actually had a Zoom meeting between current team members not that long ago, in sort of like a lockdown. I was actually sitting right where I am now,
Right.
And they were giving me a hard time because my hair's longer now, and they're like, "Geez, you really struggled from the COVID, man. Look at that hair." But yeah, they were going on about it, and just like, I don't know, there's something about the camaraderie between Australian teammates. I don't think that, and someone touched on this when we had that meeting, that I don't think it's something where other teams want to be in the Australian team, but they have a certain respect for the way that the team carries itself, just in terms of teammates and the camaraderie between us all. There's a certain sense that when the Australian team is there, and it is, it's just like nothing else, getting to represent your country, and I just absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Like there's a way in which the Australian team carries itself at international tournaments that has elicited a lot of respect, and because I would assume that was the case for the teams before you, like when you were a little kid, as you grew up as a skier, did you have any sort of like readily examples in Australia, like someone you were looking up to, or did you have those like by virtue of traveling to the US and traveling internationally?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple. Like Simon Hill was the Australian record holder before I was, and I went and skied with him as a junior too. And he was a single eventer, which is so he was definitely in that in that wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it was international as well, because Simon would ski with Wade Cox, and so Coxie would be out here too, and yeah, it would just sort of stem from there. Guys like, and I feel ever since we've been talking about it earlier about shaping technique, the one that I really didn't mention before that I have to is Jason Paredes.
Of
was
course.
a huge one for me. And him and I were close from afar. I mean, he was sort of on the way out as I was coming up. But he's brutal. I mean, he was brutal with me in terms of watching events and giving me feedback, not always wanted as a guy, just 21-year-old or whatever, and getting feedback from him about how shitty my gait was on that 39. But he's definitely helped form me in terms of technique side of it, but as well the single eventers that helped, I guess, bring me along.
Yeah. No, I think it's because let me put it this way: like at home, I grew up, idolizing certain skiers from Italy.
For sure.
Now Italy's famous for a lot of slalom skiers, but I would also look up to people like Bubu Alessi and Buzzotta, who weren't necessarily slalom skiers, but I sort of admired what they were achieving in the sport. Whether it was winning worlds or winning Europeans or.
And I think there's certain things that stand out to you depending on what events you saw them in or what they did and what they did in front of you. It's one of those things that I definitely hold high in terms of going back to, representing Australia. A lot of it too is, domestically, a lot of my goals now and future too, besides my own skiing, if there's another side to it, it definitely is helping and inspiring other skiers, and I know because of those experiences with that older generation inspiring me that you need you're responsible for a lot of skiers watching you and how you actually hold yourself, and it's something that I really value, and something that is important to me. So yeah, in terms of Australians too, the other one that comes to mind is Ryan Green. He's obviously on some of the teams that I was with and lucky enough to have him as a team coach last Worlds. But Ryan and I speak semi-regularly about all sorts of stuff, and it's not just the skiing. Obviously, we're totally different skiers with him being the 3-event beast that he was, and it's more about being an Australian representative, and how we represent the country when we are skiing internationally, whether it is at an event representing the country or not, just being a skier internationally at an event somewhere, and he's taught me a lot as to how I carry myself.
Yeah, I think those things are important, and at least I would say not particularly spoken
I think
about.
they are to us. I don't think it's not always the case. There's definitely people you see out there that it's definitely not on the radar, but it definitely is important to me, and I know it is for you too.
Yeah, and like as I was hearing you talking about this, like I started, to question how I carry myself, like, so I think because I think it's of value, if you have a 13-year-old that watches you getting out of the water and walking in a certain way, stopping and have a chat with someone after your bad set or good set or whatever it is, it leaves a mark. It leaves a mark. So I think we could all do a better job at that.
100%, and they're the ones that you hit on. It's important, maybe more important on the ones where you haven't skied that well, but they still may think that you're the greatest skier they've ever seen, and it's going to play a big part potentially long term for them if they see you get out of the water and wrap your ski around a tree or something. It's it's just you just cannot do that. It's too important to our sport, let alone representing a country or how you hold yourself.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, you gave me good pointers here to think about for my own self. Although I haven't smashed a ski on a tree for 12 years.
Neither have I.
For 12 years. I managed to hold on for that long.
No. What was the ski?
It was a D3 that I was skiing on. Didn't like it at all. I guess not. No, I think if you go to Bennett's, you can still see the marks on that tree that I broke it on. Because you gotta face it. D3s are well built. On the left is the Matteo.
Yeah, that's the Matteo tree over to the left.
It takes a lot of power to break a ski, and D3s are well built ski, but I managed.
Well done, Matteo. Well done, buddy.
So, look, let's take a little break, and then we come back. Okay?
All right.
Sweet. Hi there. Just taking the opportunity from this little break Nick and I had to thank you. Thank you for tuning into the podcast, to the Waterski podcast, the Waterski Bits. Thank you for supporting this endeavor. It's good fun. It comes with obviously quite a bit of effort and coordination, but the way these episodes and this podcast have been resonating with the Waterski community is no short of humbling and exciting. So I just wanted to take a few seconds to thank you all. Spread the word about water skiing, spread the word about the podcast, and ski hard. Okay, back to the interview. Okay, Nick, we're back from a little break. There's a question I have, we spoke about Moomba being your first international event. But, over the years, you became a pro skier. You started traveling the world to ski pro events. I guess my question is, were all the other events a bit of a letdown? Because, in a lot of...
Because of Moomba's Moomba?
Yeah, exactly. In a lot of people's mind, Moomba is the ultimate event, is what...
Yeah.
It represents almost everything that every skier wishes their career to be.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Some people, it is, man. It's not even close.
No, exactly.
It is. It is its own beast. There's the other huge events, and they have their own vibe. But like you said, when people imagine what a pro event can be, that's it. Middle of the city, on a holiday weekend, a festival right next to it. That's like something made up out of a dream. The final on the holiday, you walk through the crowd in your event, you make that Moomba final on the Monday. That's, I think anyone that says that that's not their, like somewhat of a mini win just to get to that Monday, anytime they have, go into that event, they're lying. That is, if you make Moomba Monday, just because of how cruel that the event can be to a lot of skiers that fly a lot, a lot of miles to get there, and just how unpredictable it can be. It's just what makes it even crazier and even cooler, But to answer your question, no, because like as much as Moomba is the best international event, it's still home, and to a lot of internationals, it's this cool different city, and in my humble opinion, is the best city in the world. There's still there's new things to it for internationals coming over. So to me, going to other events, it's a different crowd, and even though it may not have that same huge thunder roar to it with the crowd, it's a different vibe for a different city. So, even when the Malibu Open was in Milwaukee and they were trying real hard to push it as a city event, there's definitely a different vibe to it that you appreciate being away from home,
Yep. Yeah. No, because I can see, because on one hand, you could make the argument that, you grew and became a better skier by virtue of, getting out of your bubble, as you said, and experiencing, new coaches, new lakes, skiing against different people. But then the best event that there is right at home. And for you, like at home, so.
Yeah. It used to say, like, I mean, it was literally the only event that I would do that I would get to sleep at my childhood bedroom, in my bed at home. It was the only event I would ever get to do there, which is strange.
Yep. Yeah, no, it is. It is like you live in the city with the best event in the world,
Yeah, and it is strange. It's like it's always, every year, no matter what, it's always a little bit of worlds colliding, because a lot of the international faces with friends of other skiers that I'm used to seeing overseas are suddenly in the backdrop of my hometown,
right.
So it is always, I never get used to that side of it.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
What year did you come? What year was it that you were here? I don't even remember which year it was.
It was 2000. I believe it was 2010. No, 2011.
Okay.
2011. It was my last year in UL as a bachelor student. I wasn't too heavy on exams, and I decided to make the trip.
Okay.
Don't ask me how it went.
Priorities.
Don't ask me how it went. It was a tremendous experience, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's, like we said, that's the dice you roll getting on that plane, baby.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Like, you're throwing dice blindfolded, like left-handed,
Balancing, yeah.
But it was a tremendous experience. I mean, I got nowhere close to making it to Moomba Monday, but I was there. I saw it, and
you were there.
It was.
You got in.
Yeah, it was insane.
You got in off that dock. You went under the bridge.
I went under the bridge. Yeah, that's pretty much like half of my set. I went under the bridge.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I did. Because I did half first pass, and then I remember I swam from that buoy all the way to shore without even breathing, pretty much. But yeah, sore memory, but tremendous experience, that's for sure.
Oh, there's one way you can fix all of this.
I know.
Not that it needs fixing.
I know.
But
I know.
You know where it is.
I know what it is. I know the flight.
Exactly.
Although probably from here I would do it
eastbound.
I would think.
Yeah, you would from Italy. It would be a long way going the other way back again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Hey, Matteo, I've got a question for you, man. I was thinking about this today, and knowing that I was going to speak to you and see that videos. As a collective, right? And someone actually asked for this, and I've just been thinking about it since. Do you think that, like, because we're in a small sport, that it's why there's so many weirdos in our sport? Or do you think it's, like, worse in a bigger sport like tennis, and there's just a bunch of, like, even more crazy people?
That's a beautiful question, and I mean, I think any water skier listening to this understands the question, because you go, whether it's your ski partners or you go to a ski club or a ski school, or you meet someone at the whatever venue of your life that is a skier. There's a lot of weird people in water skiing.
The quota, yeah. I'm just like,
I don't know.
This is weird.
I think it's, it's. I'll try to give you this answer. Then that's one of the conclusions I got to. Part of it is that it's a small sport. Yes. So it might attract interesting characters, but
for sure.
I think also the nature of the sport being,
now you're getting where I'm going,
you're skiing
for sure.
against a course that you can't win against, right? Really makes it for that weird combo of people. And I say that because recently, like 3 weeks ago, actually, I got to meet one of the founding members of our club together with my coach and my dad. And he has stopped skiing ages ago and now plays golf.
Okay.
Like a lot.
Wow.
Plays a lot of golf. Like
yeah. From one crazy sport to another.
Exactly. Like he planned his whole life, retired at age 42, and he's playing golf. Like 6 months in Italy, 6 months in California. Like kind of like, resembling the life he was doing as a skier. And that conversation came up, and he said, no, Matteo, golf is plenty of weird people play golf, like a lot.
Yeah, right.
And there's a lot of people that play golf. So I think it's that nature of like, you can't beat the course, like you're always you're going in with a winning mentality in a sport that you can't win,
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. That there's always another ball. There's always another buoy to go around, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's just, full of the eclectic too, just because of, I guess, the combination of like the finesse / competitiveness / I guess variables. There's all these different facets with, obviously, the things that you can change, whether it's your technique and your equipment and all the other sides to it that just make these I guess interesting people come out of the woodwork sometimes.
Yeah, they do. And I think one of the things that maybe it's because we're a small sport, but I don't think so. I think it's the nature of slalom skiing is
of the beast.
Is if you take you have your students, like someone that is into, like say 52K, 55K, right? Like they are facing similar struggles, like technically, maybe not equipment yet, but technically, physically, mentally, that you face at 10-5, So you also have that, like, you can report right away by the time you're running a few passes in the course with the problems that every other skier has. And I think it creates that community of weirdos,
Yeah. Well, there's definitely that community side of it. And it's all relative, right? There's people that will talk to you about their skiing, and there's generally something that they feel they can relate to no matter what level you're at. There is definitely that community sense to it. But, like as a collective, I think at high-end skiing, we've got a pretty good group, man. I don't know. There's a lot of people that are generally willing to help others. I think at the top is a pretty good group of that. You know what I mean? I guess people you would consider pro skiers. It's not like other extreme sports. Like I have other friends in what you consider, I guess, other extreme sports, and you hear of ex-athletes in dead or in jail and crazy stuff happening with how it works out, and nothing to do with the financial side. I mean, sometimes, but just certain things with how the lifestyle gets them going down different terrible paths. And I just I think in a lot of ways we're pretty lucky with skiing with who they have representing at the top now.
Yeah, no, I think so. And
as a whole,
no, I would say, and I think maybe one thought that came to mind that I want to share with you. I think it's because we have a long history of people wanting to be good at this thing. Like there's a lot of other pro sports that are out there that, for lack of a better way of explaining it, like they are recent, right? Like they've only recently in the last 20 or 30 years become, well known, and there's some kind of like competitive avenues that they can, test their skills and compete against each other. Water skiing has been around for ages. I think that's one of the things people don't realize. Like I interviewed Marina Mosti last week, and her dad was European champ in 1954, which that tells me there were European championships in the 50s.
In the 50s, it's pretty crazy. I mean, when you think of how it's developed, it's pretty wild, but yeah, you're right. Compared to a lot of new age sports, it has been around as what's considered water skiing for a long, long time. And as well, I think the other thing you got to touch on too, with it being a good collective, is just the fact that skiing is such a family sport. We're so lucky that the sport that we do is an all ages thing, is something where everyone can do it, and it's a summer sport where everyone's out and active together.
Yeah, no, I think it's huge. I see 100. I see it, with my dad. It's funny how, it was a family thing, then I left, and now that I'm back, like, I don't have to wait for my dad to take a ski ride. I work at the ski school, but I kind of want to wait for him, like, so that we can ski together.
Sure.
So
yeah, and I'm the same too with my dad when I'm over here. It's funny, a lot of people will talk to me about, because my dad skis tournaments still. He's very active and loves the sport as much as he ever has. Nice. And they ask me about with us skiing together, but it does sort of suck a lot of the time. I'm away, and if I'm away for a clinic, he'll be up there getting to ski where I'm based out of. And then, we'll cross paths in the main, this middle of summer bit coming up these next couple of weeks. But, it is something that I definitely value a hold close to me now more than I ever did.
Yeah.
And it's, again, that family side of it still is what, in the background is what keeps me very much connected. And I have, younger family too, getting into it now too. That's, it's pretty special.
Yeah, no, that is special. I don't know if it's because of me coming back home, but my sister started skiing now. And
awesome.
She skis, 4 times a week. Like, bought a wetsuit when it got cold. Worked on gates and had to tie the screws to their binding. Like, she's a slalom skier. Which was awesome for me.
Okay.
It was awesome for me.
Is your dad over the moon that you're back?
Yeah, he's pretty happy. He's obviously an old-fashioned parent, so he can't show. He can't say.
No, of course not.
He can't say I'm happy you're back.
No. No, exactly.
But I think he is.
Yeah. Just because he's not saying it doesn't mean he's not very. It doesn't mean he's good at hiding it either.
Yeah. According to friends at ski school and in family, he's not very good at hiding it. But with me, he manages. He manages to hide it with the sun.
Yeah, very good.
Hey, look, you've heard me saying this before, and we had a conversation about this in California last year about, like something that I really care about, which is the growth of the sport.
Right.
I'm curious to hear your take on, like, down, in Australia. Like, do you feel the same? Like, do you see more people skiing, more tournaments being attended? What is the vibe there?
Yeah, 100%. The last few years has definitely been a turn in skiing. Queensland is sort of like our tropical state, sort of like, I guess, in terms of climate, our Florida.
Yeah.
And you would not believe, knowing what you know about Florida, how there wasn't, it wasn't that long ago that Queensland at nationals, you have state representatives state by state. Queensland was the smallest state, and it just made no sense. They had like 5 competitors, and they had this tropical paradise for skiing as a home base. And so it was bound to happen that it would explode at one point, and it has, well and truly. So, I think in Australia that's been a huge push, but I think just generally, I think it is a worldwide phenomenon that these last couple of years the tide has definitely changed in terms of skiing and interest in tournament skiing and that family side of it growing again. You know, I'm sure you've talked with guests in the past just about how, you know, there was that downturn with wakeboarding coming through and everything that happened. But I do genuinely feel like these, you know, let's say these last 5 years, there definitely has been a turn in the tide as to, you know, people getting out there.
Yeah, but what do you attribute that to? I'd be curious to hear your take. What happened? Maybe it's not one event, one single thing that made it change, but what do you think has happened?
Well, a big part of it, like I said, was with that Queensland exploding, just with interest up there and accessibility up there to skiing sites and having skiing available. I mean, that's a huge part of our skiing, right? It always has been. Availability or access to ski is a huge part. You cannot take your skiing to the local park and just kick a ball around like football. It's different to that. But I think partly because of that state growth, but as well, I think it has a very strong grassroots connection. We have a few series of tournaments here that has kept, I guess, grassroots skiing going, where it's not as I guess, apprehensive for skiers to feel like they can go in an event and learn from it and get better and feel comfortable in that tournament situation. That they've done well here. The federation over here has done a great job at that, you know, bottom level to build stuff up, and it's starting to really, fruition is starting to really come to fruit now.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things. You know, like in a lot of realities, I would say the grassroots movement kind of came up on its own. But I'm glad to hear that your federation is trying to work on it, because that's one huge part of growing water skiing. You know, like there needs to be more people on skis. You know, no matter what they're doing.
Yeah, and 100%. Yeah, and it's very different from when I was a junior. I'm not afraid to say that, you know, when I was a junior, it did have a lot more of a feel of elitist to it in terms of families that were high in skiing, and if you weren't one of those families, you weren't shit. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to swear on this or not, but you know what I'm saying. They weren't, you know, if you weren't in with them, it was nothing. And that's just not how it feels like that at all anymore. You know, there is this real sense of community where you can start and have people around you. I just don't like it in any sports or anything where you feel like there is this elitist group that it's it's impossible to break through. The skiing that's not what we do this for. You do this as a fun sport where it is involving community. It's, you know, you can't go out and ski by yourself, man.
Yeah, no, you can't. And it's certainly better to finish your ski ride and have people to share, you know, the joy of having skied with, you know, like talking about whatever it is.
And even my skiing today, you know, if I'm out there training and I have, and this is a bit, it's not necessarily on that big sense like we're talking about here, but I've definitely, with my students and the training that I do and the skiers that I have around me, I'm definitely I've been working these last few years in Australia at really growing what I would consider a culture around me, in terms of skiing and in terms of the skiers and the way that skiing is, I guess, brought up, around, you know, I guess state to state, and the skiers that I train, creating this culture of, like I said, community or involvement, so that it wasn't so much an elitist thing. It's been a really important part of, I guess, me doing my clinics and coaching the people I do.
Yeah, no, I think it's huge. I also see the value, although I know that's not I would think it's not the priority for you to create this culture, but I can see the value for those skiers who are trying to become competitive skiers. You know, like you know, because you've done your fair share of tournaments, how hard it hits when you don't ski up to your potential or up to, you know, what you think you can do. And one thing is that you pack your ski in the ski bag and you feel alone. And another thing is you feel part of a community. You're happy if someone else of your body skis well. It's a completely different experience. It makes you go home and reassess and start training again, you know?
It is, and we're in an individual sport. Going back to team representative, it is the one time when you are representing a country. It is the one time in our individual sport that you actually do have this sense of team, and it is a different vibe, And me creating the culture that I've tried to help create in Australia with skiers and coaching the skiers that I do, especially with the juniors. I am the head slalom coach for the Australian Junior ski school that we have annually, and it's from skiers all over the country that will come, and there'll be this sense of community and I guess growth where you're not alone in this. You're out there as an individual sport, but you can bounce off of each other. It's not this thing you're alone the whole time with it. And it works better for some than others. It's not for everyone in terms of having that team side of it. But I think it is important that skiers are exposed to that sense of community.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's crucial.
Culture is everything as far as I'm concerned, Matteo. Just not only with the coaching side of it, but with the companies that I involve myself with and everything else. Culture is key. You go back to that. I'm not on skis or using gear that I don't fully respect and are all about the culture that they have.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can respect that, because let's face it, there's not a lot of money into this game, so one could easily fall prey to the temptation of going, oh, maybe I go here, without looking at this more important aspect of culture.
100%.
Now, one of the things I'm curious is kind of like and I mean, I know that your routine has obviously been broken by this year's COVID, like I guess a lot of skiers has. But, like, at least speaking from a personal, from a personal side, I've noticed how the way I train, the way I think about my skiing has really changed over the last few years. And not just because of COVID, just because of, I guess, me growing up and changing as a person. I was wondering maybe if you could give me some examples of, maybe some of the things you used to do a few years ago that you do differently now, or what you were focusing before and focusing on now.
Yeah, I mean, something that's stuck with me that I guess hasn't changed is I don't want to be a pro skier that stops learning. I'm not naming names, but there's definitely been pro skiers in, times before we were in the sport that, that I know that, are definitely idols to me that stopped learning. They were happy with a sense of what they were as a skier, and I'm never going to be like that. Even with coaching, I don't want to be coaching the same stuff I would have been 2 years ago, because to me it's something that's continually to evolve, and I want to get better at it, and my skiing is number one with that.
Right.
So that's something that hasn't changed. I'm never want to ever get complacent. But in terms of the last couple of years, I'm with you. There's definitely been some growth there, partly because of COVID, and like I said, going up north to this somewhat ski exile, which I loved, but I definitely was going up there to really recalibrate a lot of stuff. But even before that, the last couple of years, there's been this, I guess, part of me that's going into self-discovery about it, just because, a couple of reasons. I guess one of them is that whole idea of identity foreclosure, where you're solely defined by what you do, and I think I was consumed by it for a while there, consumed by the game or the sport or whatever you want to call it, where it was who I was. And if you go down that path, which some people do, then you don't ski anymore when you're an old man, and who are you? You're lost because you're not a skier anymore, and that's who you are. So it's not the case anymore. It is a huge part of what I do, but it's not who I am. I have all these other facets to me, but skiing is what I do. And the other thing too, I guess, this whole look in this stress or anxiety of wanting to do well. like I don't do what I do. Like, I don't compete to do it for relief. You know, those skiers that I'm talking about who ski, and it's sort of like when they do well, it's almost like this relief that they've not fucked it up,
Right.
or done, you know, or they're trying not to let the people around them down. I don't do it for anyone but me. I love to do what I do. And yeah, the other side of it too, Matteo, is that switch, right? The whole switch of like, when you lace them up to go out there. So like when I lace up my hard shells on my syndicate to go ski in an event, I'm flipping that switch like this is nothing else matters to me, right?
Right.
But then getting better at that, turning that switch off, because, you know, when you get off the water, you realize that it doesn't matter at all, and you get to skim across the water for a living, and things are pretty great. But I think for a while there, that switch was broken. And I didn't know how to turn it on and off. I definitely knew how to turn it on, but but turning it off is a whole nother deal. And I know it's bit
I think
different
it can
for
happen both ways, right? Like I think
Right.
you know, I think your case is the most common one, obviously. Like you tend to stay solely switched onto the sport and onto your own, you know, like thirst for scores, performances, which are, it's a normal
sure.
thing for athletes. I mean, you know, like that's
yeah,
what you.
but I just want it. Yeah, I just want it so bad. You
Yeah.
know, I really want to get better, and you know, I'm not lying to anyone when I say to myself that I want to be one of the best in the world. This is the craft I work at, and I want to be one of the best, and it's something that drives me. And it's not just motivation, because, you know, when your motivation lacks, it's your systems that take over, or, you know, your training that takes over. So, you know, I guess, what is that term they say, like rise to the occasion or fall to your level of training? That's me. You know, I don't want it to be something where I'm solely relying on it as a motivation, but it is. I've never had any trouble with that side of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I could also see like how it could work the other way around. You know, like it can become just, tournaments is something you do, and you know, you almost become detached from the scores, which there's also a problem with that. You know, like if you're someone that, like, you know, this went well, but I could have gone better, or this went poorly, but I don't care. You know, like that sort of like detached approach to it can also have his own detriments. But I'm obviously.
But do you think that skiers that have that opposite like that are in it for much longer, or they end up moving away from the sport, or it changes, or what do you think happens with that other side of it, not being able to switch it back on?
I think the long-lasting aspect of skiing diminishes both if you are either, you know, turn on all the time or turn off all the time. I think the idea is to be able to turn the switch, you know, and I think it's super connected to what you talked about prior in terms of identity. You know, like it's much easier to have your finger on the switch and control it if you don't see yourself just as a water skier, right? And I think maybe not these days, but there certainly has been a time, and I would defend right before our generation, that, you know, people didn't even know that it was a switch. You know, they were always on and on and on. And when someone turned off the light for whatever reason, or they had to turn it off, then they were really lost. You know, and I think the ability to switch on and off, as you define it, which I think is a beautiful way of thinking about it, it's huge. It's important. And even if anything, that sense of community that you're trying to foster in your coaching and whatever you happen to influence skiers helps a lot.
Sure.
At any level.
It does. It does, because it makes you see the big picture in a lot of the stuff that you do. But you know, we're talking about our own skiing here. I think, you know, the difference, I was thinking about this before with you and I, and just the fact that, like, obviously we've both come international to go to the States for events and everything else, you have this connection with skiers where, you know, you may have done college with skiers or whatever. Skiers have these connections, and it's just like any other thing. You obviously have people that you get on with better than others, and it's one of those things. So I think I found it hard for a long time how buddy some skiers would be at events, and like I said, because they went to college together or whatever, and me being an international outsider, it wasn't always the case. I had these friends that I would be so stoked to see when I would get to see them at events, but you know, the thing that I guess I found hard is like, that's all well and good, but if we're on the dock together, like I want to end your career. Like, I want you questioning whether you should be skiing anymore. Because if it's me versus you and you get to eat tonight or I do, it's no question. But like I said, I found it really hard to switch that on and off and being okay with the fact that you actually do become a better skier having people around you that, you know, I guess are doing the same thing as you too. Like I said, I came from an area where there's not that many skiers. So when I started to go international and have all these skiers that were around me, and not necessarily worse than me at all, there's some skiers a lot better than me, then it was a totally different way that I, you know, had to approach things.
Yeah, it's a big difference. It's a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think part is just, competitive nature too.
Yeah, no, which you need to, you know, you need to have that in order to succeed in the slalom course. You know, like there's no way around that. Like, and the dock, man, let's not even start talking about, you know, the dock environment, like, can be,
for sure,
you know, managing that. It's a huge part of like the mental game in slalom.
Oh, for sure, man. I remember being skiing in opens as still a junior and going up in speed for just to ski in the opens, and the dock was brutal. Yeah. The dock was like the hardest bit, but it's just, you know, it's part of the deal, and I don't think it's really like that anymore. I don't know, but yeah, it was a whole nother game, man. But like I said, it's
I think
it's part of the deal.
Yeah, it's part of the deal, and I think a lot of it is how a skier approaches it, right? Like, which is why I think and I suggest to all the skiers that I happen to coach or influence to do as many tournaments as they can, even if they're not in perfect shape, you know, like performance level. You get used to, you know, showing up to a site, look at the lake, having to sit on the dock, putting your bindings on. The boat crew is not of your choice, and you have to perform. You have to ski the buoys that you know how to ski, you know.
And it's just reps in that situation, in tournament situation. I had this kid that I would coach pretty regularly in South Australia who was a boxer, and we would talk about, you know, there's a big difference. And he sort of randomly came out with this once, that there is a big difference between boxers that have fought before, like it's their first match, or they've fought more than one match. And he was going on about it, just the guys that it's their first match, they haven't been punched in the face before. Maybe they've had it in training or whatever, but it's different in a match. And that's what it's like. I mean, these guys that ski tournaments every second weekend or whatever, they're used to getting punched in the face. It's fine. They keep rolling with it. But the guy that skis one event a year, they may have been punched in the face last year, but it's a long time between drinks, you know? Like you said, you get skiers getting those reps in, and you're going to be a better skier.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
What?
The other thing, I was just going back to your original question. I mean, I guess things that I've been working on and these changes. It is one of these things. I don't think it's the case for everyone, but it definitely is the case for me that you know, each year, and more so this year, just because it's been the wild year without the tournament side of it. I will go back and constantly reassess the different aspects of being a better skier, because like we said, it comes down to this game of centimeters. I'll look at the different aspects, whether it's the mental side, whether it's something with the physical side or the technique side, or, you know, we may be working as a team with this syndicate stuff, with working on with product to, you know, help us generate better scores. all of these things I'll go back, or even just, you know, just as important as anything, dietary stuff as well.
Yeah.
Because all of it matters. And that I'll sort of refer to that as like my performance ATM, where I'm just making these deposits, where a couple of years ago I wasn't thinking about that side of it at all, where, you know, obviously some of them, but each year I would try and get another one under my belt where I would, you know, make another deposit where I go, well, I've got that aspect a lot more figured out than I ever did. And even if it's just as much as anything, the routine in which I would do it.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I think, you know, like, performance works pretty straightforwardly. You know, like when you start any kind of endeavor, you make a lot of gains in a short amount of time, and then as you progress, you make minor gains.
The mountain gets steeper
in a long period of time, but those minor gains are the difference between, say, making it to Moomba Monday or watching it on shore, right?
Exactly. And, you know, it's that fine tuning.
And I think a lot of it, exactly, like at that level, is like having all of them at a good enough level, right? Like your technique has to be good. You have to be physically in shape to be able to, you know, to train. You have to take care of your nutrition. You have to be mentally sound. Like there's all these things. And I'd be curious, have you sort of like maybe focused on one in particular, maybe that you disregarded in the past, or has it been more like I need to carry all of them, you know?
Well, like I said, I think recently it's been more not what I did, but the way that I did it, or the routine and the timing with it. Going harder, like skiing itself, going harder does not necessarily make you better. Yeah. So, you know, as insatiable as it is to want to get that pass that you really want to run done, it's not always that combination. Yeah, so I guess it's more the way in which you do it, and how I've, you know, gone about what I do off the water, the training, and how I would get certain, not just the dietary side of it, but the off-water training stuff figured out a lot better these last couple of years, just with what helps me perform when I need to perform. I don't care what it needs to be or where I have to go to do it. It, like you said, it becomes that fine-tuning thing where that tiniest of change could make a big difference. And it showed that I've got to basically know my body a lot better than I ever did.
That's huge. That's huge. Both in terms of, like, you know, having your body like primed to perform, but I would defend equally as important, understand when you need to rest, right? And take
100%. And I was pretty bad at resting, if we're being perfectly honest, because I can run, aka function, hide it pretty well with, you know, 4 hours of sleep, but it's not going to be conducive to me performing how I want to as an athlete. And part of it too is, you know, just finding that pathway to being fully present when I'm out there skiing. And there's a lot of build up, with what I do with the coming days, the coming weeks to events to make that happen.
Yeah, no, of course it's there's a lot involved with being there, present on tournament day. You know, like a lot of the cards need to be in order, and you know, it's interesting because for me, for example, this year I got to explore, you know, if you see all those variables into a pie and you defend that all those slices have to be somewhat equal in order for you to, you know, get from 3 to 4 F41, say.
Right.
For me, the one that I noticed I neglected a lot is equipment. And not necessarily the type of equipment I'm on, more so like how to make sure that my equipment is dialed in the best way I can. You know,
yeah.
And I know
you made me like think of the last time that you and I both skied at Jack's for an HO thing, and and I just remember we were on the Far Lake and we were trying. I don't know what ski it was. It was a couple of years ago now, and like you'd grab this ski and it was you got out there, started at like 11, and it was like you ran it, but it was like this wild pass, and we were like, what did you do to that fin? What did you do to that fin? It was pretty safe numbers on it. He's like, I don't know if it was word for word, but it was like strong Italian. I think you'd like just got off the plane, dude. You were like, if we do a change, we do it big.
Oh, yeah,
and you were just like, you showed us the numbers. I'm like, oh my God, man. You just like drop the ass out of this fin.
yeah. But I think that was maybe the beginning of me, like, you know, wanting to look for more, you know, because I've always like disregarded minor changes if I couldn't really feel them or understand them, you know. Whereas I think this year I got more into, because I feel like I started to understand more about how equipment works, then I was able to do fine tuning and all that sort of stuff, which is funny that I have been doing that for a number of years for students. Whereas when it came to my own skiing, I would just go brutal. You know, like, you know, super brutal to make sure that my idea was on the right track, because I was trying to eliminate all the other variables. You know, like sometimes you make an adjustment of 0.003 of an inch and it feels worse, but was it because you didn't sleep, because you ate poorly, because physically you're not there?
I'm hearing you, but I think honestly some people, you know, depending on your technique and how you actually ski too, some people it affects a lot more than others. Some people are just a lot more attuned to it, and some are a lot more highly exposed to it just with the way that they ski. It's not always the case that, you know, it's the same for everyone, and you know, like you said, as well as I do, that you learn a lot, and I'm very thankful for any student of mine that I've ever had that I've worked with them on tuning a ski, that, you know, I've learned from that big time. And I've definitely been able to import that to my own skiing side of things with us doing ski testing and everything else, that it's been a huge benefit.
Yeah, no, for sure. And one of the things that I sort of got out of it for my students, like meaning me starting to focus on equipment more, is to realize how, akin to what we were saying before about like you can relate to a skier, you know, that is sort of just running a few passes in the course, equipment is huge for them too. Like, you know, I know we don't want to speak about it too much because it feels like, you know, equipment, you just change a ski and you ski better. Well, sometimes it kind of is like that, you know, like you got people that sometimes, but, you know, like you got people that are on wrong size ski, or, you know, their boots are like a mile apart, and you're like, no, man, like really this change will help you. You know, like
100%, yeah. And it's been a huge part with stuff that we've done with HO in Australia too, and having I guess dealer days where dealers will come out and I'll help these dealers set up skis for skiers that want to come in and try them, and just being able to show, I guess, how the right setup really can make a big difference. We've been super lucky to be able to do that these last couple of years, and it's made a huge difference, not just in terms of skis, but as well the way that people approach what they have.
Yeah, no, it's been huge.
So would you say the equipment, that piece of the pie for you, is bigger than some of the other parts of the pie? Because you said about equal parts, where to me, that pie graph to me is a crazy eclectic sort of pie, because I have different things that I value a lot more that I've learned these last couple of years that I need to have as bigger slices than others.
Yeah, I think... I guess maybe it's a simplistic graphical representation, but what I have in mind is, for me to perform at my best, I have to have all the ducks in order, right? Like, and if it is, you know, if one has to go up, I have to make sure that it's not at the expenses of the other, right? So, for instance, I can give you a straightforward example. Like I felt I worked really hard this winter on a couple of technical changes in my skiing. Yep. And I started fidgeting around with equipment once I felt that those changes were ingrained in me. Right. So they weren't going to get complacent or get out of whack just because you've made the change to the equipment. Exactly. So that when I made a change to the equipment, I feel I could assess it better. Right. 100%. And you can rely on the change being something that you can feel. Exactly. So that's kind of an example of like, okay, I decided to focus a lot on equipment this year because I felt that, you know, nutrition was in order, physical could have been a little better, but not too bad. Technique looked solid. Like I liked the 2 changes that I made. And I'll tell you even more. I made changes this winter with an equipment change in mind. And I realized that for me to be able to use that equipment, which honestly is the Omega, I needed to make certain changes to be able to ski that ski. But it started from a belief in a certain type of equipment. And, you know, I feel like it paid off. Like this year, I probably skied the best I've ever skied. So,
fantastic.
You know, but again, had it been focusing on the equipment at the expenses of technique or at the expenses of, you know, say physical training, then I wouldn't have seen the scores that I saw this year. You know, so it's a super hard balance.
It is, and that's the line we walk as pro skiers, man. You have to have, you know, like you said, your ducks in order, or as shout out to someone that's really close to me. You know, you have to take care of your side of the street, and the other stuff will come. You know, I guess to follow up then, I know that there's definitely been parts of my technique, like I said, I never want to be complacent about that. I will always go into an off season having certain keys that I want to get, you know, up my game with. And some of them are more important than others. I agree with you that you need to really feel like that is sound before you go anywhere down the road of, you know, I want to say technology, but basically equipment. Yep. But to me, that biggest one that stands out, because there was a couple of technique things, and there was one minor equipment change, but it ended up being a lot less a deal than I thought it was going to be, and that's good news.
Yeah, that's nice when it works that way, doesn't it?
So nice. And well, just, you know, everything started to click the way I wanted it to. When, you know, it's nice to know that you go in a bit blind and hoping that it will work out that way, but when it does, it's just so nice. And yeah, we were, you know, just at the tail end of this new pro coming out, and sort of getting dialed on that side of stuff, where it was the same thing. It just sort of like the pieces sort of fit, and it was good timing with equipment as much as anything with me, being in this skiing exile this year, right, as I'm calling it. But yeah, that thing that I mentioned earlier about going back and really looking at this this broken switch stuff, or this self-discovery stuff, is really being huge for me on water, because it's one of those things that stress, or that anxiety to really want to do well, and no longer doing it for relief, or, you know, like for other people, or whatever you want to call it. It's hard, you know, because that dragon, or whatever you want to call it, has burnt me again and again in the past, and I knew that if I wasn't going to go into that dragon den and make a relationship with it, I was going to be afraid, and standing outside of the cave with my sword, terrified to go in and look it in the eye if I didn't just, you know, make peace with it, or, you know, like have a relationship with it. So to me, it's been a huge gain on, I guess, the mental side of it. But again, it's something I continually work on, and I work on with my students too. Anyone that's skied with me before knows that my sports psych is a huge part of what I do with skiers, because you've got to remember, you know as good as anyone that you're coaching personalities. You're not coaching skiers. Yep. Skiing is what you do, but I may explain something to someone 20 different times to get them to fire, depending on their personality and how they approach stuff, you know? It's whatever it takes. So that's been a huge side of it for my personal growth as a skier. These last, you know, let's say this last 2 years.
And obviously, you know, you're tickling the professional side in me here. What are the things that you feel have helped you face the dragon, or sort of like have a relationship with it?
What particular things I've done about it, or what do you think?
Yeah,
is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think part of it, if I may venture in guessing, is the fact that right now you just, that identity foreclosure that you might have felt before is not as prevalent anymore. So I can assume that would help.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's not being all consumed by the game like I have been in the past, you know?
Yeah.
It's definitely still my craft. I definitely have this competitive side of it. There's definitely still the escapism of skiing that, you know, that being fully present like we talked about earlier. But it's not it's not that thing where on the dock it reoccurs as this thing of you know, not even self-doubt, but just stuff where it wants you to question or push and pull how you're going to go about your business out there, even though if you've done the training. So I think one of a couple of things, I guess, my I guess meditation and breathing work has been a huge step up. I've really stepped up my game this last year. Mm-hmm. Like you said earlier, knowing how to actually relax has been a huge part. A minor part. It's not really, honestly, that it never really has been that big a part of the dragon for me, but I've definitely assessed it. Is just that whole thing, you know, like there's the acronym FOMO. Well, the one for me, for skiers, a lot of skiers that I work with too, instead it's sort of FOPO, which is I sort of call fear of other people's opinions. Yeah. It's been a huge part, and like I said, not so much for me, but it is something that you go through in terms of not so much skiers. I don't really care what any other skiers around me care or think of my skiing. It's more the people that are close to me that I want to do well for. Like I said earlier, that fear of letting people down. It's just something that I needed to free myself from a bit more.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and I think, you know, like, so that's sort of like healthy detachment, not from your performances, but from being a skier can help. You know, like you take your own time, you do you get yourself involved with other things, even if they're not necessarily things with the goal of relaxing you. They can certainly help you take your mind away from skiing, and then when you get back in it, it gives you a different perspective.
Yeah, and there's definitely times like in the past where I would have heard us having this conversation if I was a third party going, there's no way, like, skiing's my thing. There's no, like, you guys aren't training as hard then if you're doing something else, if you're going off doing this or playing that or whatever. But I'm telling you, to that younger Nick listening, it will help your skiing. You will be a better skier because of it. It does not take it away. It actually helps increase the performance.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, you know, because, you know, kids and teenagers can get into that mode as well. And I've had a couple of students whose parents asked me, you know, like, oh, he also loves playing this at school.
Yeah.
Should I pull him out of it, you know, like, so that he can come and ski more? And I'm like, beyond, well, generally the question is also, do you think him playing basketball helps him in his trick skiing? And I'm like, maybe, I don't know, but it mentally for sure, you know, mentally for
100%. It's nothing to do with the physical, like you said, maybe some random way, but it's much more the mental side of it and the release to it too. So yeah, that's been a big part of it. Again, it's just all going back to that performance ATM and making these deposits, man. I mean, these different aspects of the skiing and putting away deposits to me it's what I'm constantly trying to do. Just basically stack habits is a big part of it too. Get into these routines that I really feel like in the last couple of years I've cracked a bit more of my code as to how to go about it, whereas before I didn't necessarily. I may have occasionally hit the marks in which the way in which I needed to, but not always, and now it's a lot more of a frequent thing. So it sort of got me excited about next year.
Yeah, which is kind of what my next question was going to be. Like, you've been making these deposits, But hey, eventually you're gonna have to spend that hard work.
Exactly. Well, I'm desperate to spend it, man. I've got it. It's burning a hole in my pocket, but I need to be able to compete and to be able to get out there and do it. So yeah, if you're asking, yeah, the future, I mean, it'll see what happens with the world, but 2021 definitely stack habits, keep inspiring others, help skiers, and just keep getting better.
Yeah. No, well, that's why we strap on the ski. Part of the reason why we strap on the ski every day. So yeah, I guess more in the short term, like, are there tournaments in Australia right now that you can go ski at? I mean, not necessarily pro events.
There's a couple. It's starting to rev up a little bit. It hasn't been, and then there was a couple of random ones where they were, but they were sort of just like pretty low key events. But now it's starting to really push. Who knows what will happen with this Sydney thing? I hope it has no effect whatsoever, because everyone here is desperate, especially for like our nationals to happen.
Yeah.
Nationals are always at Easter in Australia, over the Easter holidays. So again, family sport. You can do it over the school holidays, and everyone goes to nationals for the week. And it got cancelled last year, of course. So it's just because the timing was just awful, and that's being the first. I don't think it's ever been cancelled before. So, it's a long history of people's traditions over the Easter weekend So everyone is really desperate for that to happen. And I know the Federation will be doing everything COVID safe in terms of our tournaments leading up to that, so that events like Nationals can happen.
Yeah. No, that's certainly good to hear. And then, obviously, assuming we have, and this is obviously a selfish question, but like assuming that we'll be in a better shape next summer, Northern Hemisphere summer, are you thinking about coming to Europe, doing some events here?
I am, and honestly, I was very, very excited to do a lot of events in Europe this year. 2020 was like Italy and France all over. I really wanted to get back as much as anything. I feel like I have a couple of San Gervasios in the ATM of my own that I need to
Sounds good.
I need to spend for you, man, because I owe you a few, I think, but just because of circumstance in the past. So yeah, I mean, I was desperate to get back to that and a couple of other events that I said I would go to in France. So it's just going to depend, but all being back to normal, absolutely. It's really important to me that I get out there in terms of seeing international skiers and being in this, I guess, the international ski climate. I love the fact that we do get to meet all these international people through the sport that we do. And it's cool to see, like, you get to see your sport a certain way in your country, and then every time I go somewhere out of country and they're doing your sport, but they're doing it in these slightly different mannerisms or slightly different ways, it's sort of it's always nice to go back and see how it's done differently, and I'm not talking about on the water, I'm just talking about, like, the way things go at different lakes, and you learn, they do this with their turnaround irons, they do that with the dock, just like little things like that. I enjoy too.
For sure. And you obviously are well aware of how summer was going to look like here in 2020 in Europe, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, huge.
I hope
it's just had so much promise to it.
Yeah, and I hope, like, you're happy to hear that, like, we, like, obviously I can speak for myself, but also for other organizers here in Europe, we haven't gotten discouraged. So it looks like it.
And that's
there's actually a new tournament that came up in Norway next year that wasn't on the calendar this year.
Music to my ears.
Yeah,
man.
12 for men, 12 for women, and I know the site because I skied a couple of events there. They're very solid tournament organizers, like, awesome. Great Lake. So
stand up.
Oh yeah. It's gonna be a great tournament to attend.
I love doers, man. There's a lot of talkers, but I love doers. So I'm excited to see what like I said, presuming things can go back to somewhat normal and we can able to travel and get skiing. What'll become of that? I guess mini European tour that was building these last couple of years.
Yeah, no, it's coming. It's coming back. It's not going anywhere. If anything, it's gonna grow if they let us do it. Yeah. Obviously.
For sure.
Look, anyone you want to thank? Any shout outs?
I have to shout out, you know, as much as I want to just thank my three families that are, you know, my blood, which is all my immediate family, and the other family, the Redleaks, and my other family, the Gaddies. I have to really shout out to my other family at HO. Both, you know, the guys over here that have been doing it in Australia, but you know, the guys at headquarters in Seattle, been a huge support to me the last few years, and the guys at O'Neill are just up there as much as anything at and Fluid Motion. But sponsorship aside, we've covered a lot of stuff here that is really close to me and the people around me. Like I said earlier, families in the States like the Krigbaums, the Hickeys, the Bozovics, these guys that have sort of shaped me to who I am as a skier. I really value the time that you and I have got to spend today being able to talk about this sport that we love, but as well, just like I guess a big part of that community side of it that we talked about is something that I think is really important going forward in our sport. I really want us to help in any way that we can, and you doing this podcast alone is a huge part in helping our sport grow. You know, it's such a fantastic lifestyle sport that I think can continue to grow. Like you said, these last couple of years, it seems to have internationally, or, you know, on a global level.
Yeah, no, well, thank you. And I think, you know, I was at a brunch with my dad yesterday, and I think he phrased it beautifully, because my dad and I are I mean, the how can I say, the passion for growing the sport, obviously he gave me, and he was like looking around, and he said, well, if all of us taught one person how to ski, we would be double the skiers in the world. And I know it's a simplistic idea, but it's so powerful, you know. So
yeah, and that's why I think things like Pass the Handle are huge things for our sport, just because of that purely promoting people that haven't had the opportunity to do it, to help it grow, you know.
Yeah, no, I think
there's nothing like it. Yeah, and you know, I think you'd agree, just with a lot of sports too, sport in general, team or individual, a lot of it is that pathway to being fully present, you know. And that to me is a huge part of what skiing is. And I know a lot of skiers listening to this will agree that, sure, there's that competitive side that I have, and this craft side that I continue to work at, that I want to keep continuing to get better no matter what. But it's that escapism that I think pulls most skiers in, whether they're tournament skiers or not, right? Whether they're big lake skiers or river skiers, or, you know, they are tournament skiers. There's that, you know, sustained feeling of, you could have the shittiest day at work of your life, or you could be having personal growth issues or whatever, and as soon as the boat pulls you out of the water and you're on top of that lake or whatever, and you're out there, nothing else matters, man. And it's a huge part of why we do it.
Well, it really is. I fully agree that there's almost nothing that can, you know, stay in your mind when you decide to take a ski set, you know. So for sure. For sure. Hey, Nick, look, I'm really glad we got to do this, you know.
Me too. I hope we covered everything to keep those people happy that were asking you for me to have this chat. So I'm glad we made it happen.
I'm sure they're happy, and if they get back to me and say that we didn't cover something well, we'll do this again.
We'll just have to do it again.
Yeah. Sounds good. Nick, hey, thanks a lot.
Pleasure as always, Matteo. I'll see you, mate.